ban interracial marriage. Like that's Clarence Thomas, married to a white woman, just wants to ban interracial marriage. So that's where we are. Wyatt, how many abortions have you had today?
I had to have 2 to get under the wire for when when Roe v. Wade gets repealed or whatever it does. I don't think that actually the most. I don't know. The funny thing is, the people who are most anti Roe v. Wade being repealed also don't know what Roe v. Wade did. So they're going around today saying that they've somehow banned abortion in America when they've basically just said it's not a federal issue and the federal government cannot, cram down on what Alabama wants to do, but California can still do what it wants to do. And I think it really just shows that in the U.S. it's become like sort of just mainstream, where every single thing that like Democrats want to do, they want it to be federal, and then they also want all of the essentially consequences of it to be localized in Republican states.
Yeah, that's a pretty good breakdown. Let's break down Operation Rolling Thunder and what happened. So I think it was like from a normal point of view and a normal protest, from a right-wing protest, it was a success. It was a success in the sense that they went there, they made news coverage, they got their point across. There was no violence started by the protesters. The cops got angry and like they did the thing where they did the show of force, and there was that shenanigans. But it sort of kept the freedom movement in the news cycle. The only propaganda points that they're getting out of it is of course, the ridiculous. It cost $3 million. This protest cost the city of Ottawa $3 million. Yeah, because the government decided to spend $3 million on unnecessary police presence. At the exact same time, we had the May Day, which is the Communist Day, and down in Montreal, there was actually riots and leftists just going around breaking and smashing things, causing actual damage. But those cost less money to the city because they didn't pay any police officers to stop it. So they just have to pay property damage costs.
Did you look at the reporting on the May Day events in Montreal with like the windows being smashed up? There was only like most of them just said, oh, there was a protest in Montreal and that was it. And then like a couple of the news outlets or the more local versions of the national outlets would say, oh yeah, windows were shattered. They made it sound as if windows were just breaking out of just like, I don't know, it's just their own personal choice. Like breaking that day.
They did something dishonorable. The window did something dishonorable.
Breaking Day, and Breaking Day just happens to overlap with communists protesting down like shopping districts of Montreal. Nothing to see here. But no one would ever put in the headline that communists or Antifa were going around throwing rocks at windows, which you couldn't even find.
And assaulting citizen journalists who were filming it. So that's the other thing. It's like when we talk about like this is what drives people on our side of the aisle insane, and especially people like me covering the Freedom Convoy insane, is the Freedom Convoy at every provocation, at every opportunity, the Freedom Convoy protesters chose peace. Every single opportunity they were pushed on, they chose nonviolence, peace. They cleaned up the place. It was better looking than they left it, and the media still tried to invert reality.
They were so peaceful to the point people were laughing when they were getting pepper sprayed, because it was almost kind of funny about how peaceful they were being in the face of just like ridiculous kind of violence and overbearing police force.
Well, Alan's saying they were just like Antifa. No, they were Antifa. This was Antifa. This is what Antifa does. They dress up in black bloc tactics and they smash shit. So guys, remember, like and share the video. It really helps us out. If you don't, then Justin Trudeau will take away your right to an abortion. This is another thing. So let's, okay, Rick's making a good point because Rick shows that he understands what Roe v. Wade is. Like he makes it a state issue. So yes, states. You're on it. So to go to Rolling Thunder is the new propaganda thing is the government overspends. It's the same thing. They did the Freedom Convoy. They overspend on police presence. They pay lots of people to be there. So the media can then say, oh my God, the government had to spend X dollars. The protesters did this. Right? Then they force businesses to close and they say, oh my God, look, the protesters did this. And because they control the media, either like explicitly or implicitly, these narratives get out to my aunts and uncles who just will not think critically about anything related to politics or whatever.
And the thing is, it was the most blatant thing on the ground is last time it was kind of pretty much peaceful until the very end, and then the police basically like destroyed everything and they were acting like psychopaths. But this time around, it was just kind of the entire time the protesters were being peaceful, but it seemed like the police were literally ordered to go around trying to incite some sort of a situation with protesters. If you saw that clip of that lady who got shoved from behind by an officer, turned around and gave him a shove back, and then they tried to tackle her. Like that's clearly some sort of like planned I don't know, they're just some sort of planned tactics to try and get people arrested in order to then discredit the protest.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that I saw that clip. It's exactly what you said. That lady should not have turned back around and pushed the officer. She should have.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's hard to just say, "Hey, just take that." However, the officer needs to face disciplinary because the officer instigated that. So I don't think the lady should be charged with anything because that's clearly we have it on video. Officer instigated the physicality there. So that's that. But like, yeah, I mean, that's like the one example you have of the protesters being goaded into violence and actually kind of responding. But what it took for some violence, and by violence I just mean light shoving, to break out, was the fact that the police literally had to do it unprovoked, push a lady in the back first, and then the media put out her face in a still frame looking for this lady because again they wanted to show that, oh look,
it felt deliberate too, because the still frame makes it seem like, oh, did she do something and this was the first time they got a shot of her face? Because if you played the video, it's like, why are we hunting this person down? It's ridiculous. And that sort of also happened with the reporting on all of the trucks that were being towed or being impounded or whatever tickets being handed out, is that it was people just parking, and then because they were with the protest, the police automatically considered that obstructing police vehicles or obstructing the roads or something like that. So they basically got ticketed and towed right away, despite having not been there for even an hour. It was just silly all the way around. And they were even arresting people because they had previously attended the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. It was stupid.
Yeah, I mean, just absolute nonsense, stuff to book people on. But I like, so I mean, we've covered all that. But I think, okay, do you think this has any positive political ramifications? Is the thing. Like, did Rolling Thunder accomplish anything? Like, yes, we know the media sucks and Trudeau hates freedom, and all the mandates are unconstitutional. Like, what I'm trying to say is, like, how does this movement help push the needle?
I don't think this one was a big deal, but I think it did cement in people's minds by sort of giving us another rerun of what happened back with the Freedom Convoy, that it's the protesters wanting mandates lifted, wanting restrictions lifted, and they're frustrated because of the lack of government response. And then the police and local officials like Mayor Jim Watson are the ones who are aggressively attempting to not actually let people have their voices heard. And then that's really what all that happened. Like, if you've seen the recent federal polling, I think it's legitimately 3 or 4 polling companies that have showed the conservatives at 38% and liberals at like 32%. They're like majorly ahead. I think it is because people kind of realize that the liberals are trying to keep the whole COVID thing alive as long as humanly possible, because it kind of is one of their only issues that they were sort of doing half decent on in the 2021 federal election. But as it goes on, it gets more and more clownish that they're trying to keep it alive.
Yeah, I thank God people kind of want to move on from this, because I mean, this current audience aside, I think people would understand that, or be more willing to listen to the thing that, crisis politics plays well for the people in power, right? And we've talked about this on the show of like, and I even get it from MPPs who've been in the Ford government and people inside who are like, coming out there. Thing. Oh, we have a commenter like this. I came here to hear about Roe v. Wade, but I'm the only 2 Canadians not talking about American politics. We will later. And this is a great segue, because if anyone wants to talk about this, tomorrow night, the definitive Twitter space, a conversation on Roe v. Wade will be happening. I am hosting a Twitter space tomorrow night after the hockey game ends. It is on abortion or abrotion. It will be a Twitter space for the people who are most affected by Roe v. Wade, Canadian men. So women or birthing persons, as you're like to be called, it's time for you to sit back and listen. I will be on there. TNT's expert on women's bodies, Wyatt Claypool, will be forced to be there. If he has work, he will be forced to leave work and do it. So if you do want, go click on that link, save it. Tomorrow after the hockey game, we will be running a Twitter space, giving men a safe space to talk about abortion, away from the people who are trying to steal our issue, quite honestly. So tune in tomorrow. It's going to be a banger. Okay, so yeah, what are we talking?
Moving on.
Moving on. Like, share, subscribe, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so we're going back to the Freedom Convoy. So I think you're right. It pushes the needle. It keeps us in the news. The liberals are dying. And I was saying, okay, it's good that they're finally dying in the polls on this, because yes, crisis politics plays well. Like when you talk to Doug Ford's people into the thing, what they'll say is like, oh, we didn't want to, but we had to do it. It's our response. So the media puts us in a frenzy, but then like it's their drug. Think of it like a drug addict, right? And think of the polls as a drug. So you create this panic in the public, or the public is in panic. You offer any solution as a government. You say, well, we're going to do this, right? We're going to mandate masks on the left-hand side of the restaurants for 3 months. And everyone go, oh, okay, good. Like they just need someone to solve the problem. So when you solve the problem, right, by putting forward anything, you get a bump in the polls because people like, even in Canada, people like authority. People like Big Daddy to tell them what to do. We like to think of ourselves as strong, independent waxmen, birthing peoples. But we're not. Like for the majority, like a lot of us want someone to tuck us in at night. And that's what Doug Ford got. And that's what Justin Trudeau got. And that's what a lot of COVID politics is. So it's good, though, that there is some sort of fear fatigue where people are now getting tired of it's a sixth wave, lockdown.
Well, I think the one good thing about having the Rolling Thunder protest as well is that just by having people who are part of, I guess you would call it the freedom movement, constantly going out and constantly protesting, even though you could say, well, most of the COVID issues kind of done at this point, just keep going out and kind of normalize yourselves, because the left wing tends to protest all the time, and it doesn't matter how annoying they are. Eventually, people kind of just see their protests as normal. You'll drive downtown in your city and you'll see a bunch of labor protesters, and someone will have like a communist flag from the Communist Party of Canada. You're like, I guess it's a labor protest. And you stop even reacting to the fact that someone's like flying that. It's ridiculous. But it's sort of like that the freedom movement is not insidious like the left wing kind of protest movements, but people sort of don't like them because they're in a certain sense new. They're a little bit not something that people are used to. So sticking around kind of makes yourself mainstream over time, whereas the left then becomes the fringe, kind of like the May Day protests. And I think that's how people should be trying to push the narrative, is that the left-wing protests are actually fringe, and the freedom protests have kind of everyone that shows up to them, and that's why they're much larger.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It pushes the narrative. It makes it look less fringe, which helps affect public discourse, which goes downstream. So I do think they're positive. I just want to outline it. I'll bring up Heather's comment. So yes, we did hear about Andrew state the recent study. So a lot of people say that. I think you're talking about the David Fishman study. Let's finish this topic, then we'll do the Fishman study, and then we'll go to Roe v. Wade. So I think that's I agree. The freedom movement is necessary. It shows strength. It shows it's not fringe. It also shows active non-compliance, which is what the government fears. Like, it's why I think it's pretty important these days to just not abide by any of the COVID rules anymore. Yes, they're mostly going down, but I think I'm a hero, okay, for not wearing a mask on the subway right now. A hero, I'm being glib here, but I do think it's productive now to break whatever COVID rules within reason. Like, don't go into like the ICU at a hospital maskless and be like, fuck you. No, I'm not saying that. But in like the subway, guys, like, no, just don't do it. Because what forces them to not bring the rules back is if they see enough people are done with compliance, they won't want to reinstate rules, because this is how the government power game works, is, at some level of game theory, you don't want to institute a rule no one will follow. Because if you institute a law and no one follows it, you're going to lose power. In the aggregate, people then follow less of what you're saying. A great example of this is Doug Ford. Ontario wanted to have laws that, like, you couldn't even go outside at one of the COVID waves. Like a year and a bit in, we posted a law that one of the original drafts, like the first thing was like, no one's going to be allowed to go outside. And then everyone's like, okay, this is crazy. Push back on it. And then he ended up modifying that and bringing it back, because you don't want to enact laws no one's going to follow, because then there'll be non-compliance across the board. So that's why it's very important that whatever ridiculous rules, COVID rules you see at this point, it's important that you don't comply with them. This will probably be used against me in some sort of court as like counsel to commit mischief or whatever. And he admitted it. He's counseling to commit mischief. Oh no. But it's important, because you're saving lives by ignoring COVID. Like, COVID can't be defeated, guys. There's a way to defeat COVID. COVID's a real disease, and the way it goes away is if we just ignore it. Just ignore it. If you're sick, stay home and wear a mask. Wash your hands. But in terms of COVID, the way we defeat it is we just ignore it at this point. and then it'll just become another thing. Like people get sick sometimes, and they cough and sneeze, and sometimes like people in their 90s get sick and die. 2019.
I think that's also sort of tied into why Justin Trudeau is pulling so badly these days. Is that at some point he became so much of the COVID guy that once you're kind of past the whole COVID thing, well, we don't really need the COVID guy anymore because he's the COVID guy and COVID's not around. And like, can you really name another issue that Justin Trudeau has any sort of substantial airtime on? Like, maybe housing, like not even, I can't even say that really. Like there's no other issue he's really talked about recently that is at all substantial. So he's kind of stuck with being the COVID guy that nobody needs anymore. And to a certain extent, same thing with Doug Ford. The only problem is that Stephen Del Duca and Andrea Horwath are like the exact same person, so they don't need any of them.
Yeah, but like, in Ontario politics, this Del Duca, which if you have a picture of him for the non-Ontarians, I think they need to see it. But it's basically Lex Luthor without the brains in an experiment gone wrong.
Stephen Del Duca is Lex Luthor's brother Kip.
Yeah, Lex Luthor's brother Kip, and there's a reason you've never heard of him before. That's why it's there.
I'm getting the photo prepared, so everyone gird yourself up. It's going to be scary.
Okay, so everyone brace yourselves. This is a safe space, so get in there. That's
he's such a dynamic leader. He changed the Liberal logo to the Target logo.
Remember to like and share the video. If you do like and share the video, then Stephen Del Duca will not come to your house. But every Halloween, Stephen Del Duca goes around the city and around the country. Oh God. So this guy, if you don't like and share the video, this guy is coming for you to your house to tell you to put a mask on every day.
Yeah, he's gonna come with the robot arms too.
Okay.
Just looking like a mailbox coming to your door.
All right. We have a question for Wyatt. Does Wyatt play Dungeons and Dragons?
I do. Sometimes. It's really hard to get a group going.
Yeah. Wyatt Claypool, expert on women's bodies in Dungeons and Dragons. Nice. Okay. Let's cover that David Fishman story that people brought up, because I think this is really important. Like, this is again why COVID has to die, because insane people are running the asylum. And I think a lot of people have seen this. This is the study that says that unvaccinated people are a risk to vaccinated people. And this isn't a study. This is just someone's thoughts written down with no statistical backing to any of it. Like, Fishman literally made up all the different metrics and then put them into a model based on assumptions. Like, it basically, what the study says is, if you assume unvaccinated people are dangerous, then you plug it into a model and it turns out unvaccinated people are dangerous to the vaccinated people. It's like, okay, but what if you don't assume that unvaccinated people are dangerous? Then what do you have? But the entire model, like, it's built into like the numbers. Just like, well, let's just say for every unvaccinated person, the spread is X amount more likely. And it's, at this point, he's just like making up numbers. He's just making up numbers and putting them in. It was like, yeah.
I think it's sort of going to the whole, like, there's this, like, because we say that we hear this and it's completely ridiculous, but I think there's kind of a trend in media, or two different trends, where I think people like us and our audience and whatnot, they'll see, they'll see like whatever the media is saying about COVID, and they'll be like, but I live my life. I go outside every day, and this does not actually reflect reality from what I live. Except there's a lot of other people, like I would say almost an equal amount, I'm not sure at this point, that will watch the CBC or Global News or CTV, and someone will come out with those statistics, those garbage statistics, and they'll say, well, the expert on television said that, so I'm going to perceive reality the way that they tell me to. And they still go around every day wearing 2 masks and like trying to socially distance and whatnot, even though reality around them does not bear out the statistics that they're hearing on the news. And hypothetical statistics too. I don't know why we're caring about hypothetical studies when we've literally already had it for 2 years.
Yeah, it's beyond stupid. But again, does Fishman take money from these pharmaceutical companies? Maybe. Like, I'm at the point where, like, I don't think everyone who disagrees with us is a paid shill. Now, are there some people on the payroll of Pfizer and Moderna, and has Pfizer and Moderna's financial influence affected science, TM? Yes, absolutely. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm simply saying that David Fishman might be just insane and histrionic enough to like want to lie for the cause. And the cause is COVID. Like, I think this is more like a religious belief for him, like a religious conviction. Like he's like, he's one of those apologists. Like after like Al Qaeda flies planes into a tower, he's like, no. This has nothing to do with the books. It says, fly planes into towers. This is, oh, blah blah blah. Like I do think he's a true believer in COVID, and I think that it's anything for the cause. And maybe we'll find out this was paid to come and he was just taking money the entire time. But I think it's likely that I know a lot of people who are just insane, and COVID is broken.
I think people have to kind of like realize that when people are saying insane things, it's so often because they actually believe it and not because they're being paid. Because most people wouldn't be willing to take money to say something that they don't believe, in my mind, at very least, if it's not a crazy amount of money. I think people just underestimate how much people just believe things that aren't true because it makes them feel comfortable or makes them feel important.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing is, like, to create these correlations is a lot of times people believe something. A lot of the George Soros stuff. Like, so a lot of people who are like being paid by Soros organizations. Now, the way this usually works is they're far left. So I'm not saying like they're ideologically better than like, no. Justin Trudeau actually believes the same thing Soros does. But let's say, just in a different world, Justin Trudeau never became prime minister, didn't go into politics. He's just like a motivational speaker for the left or some sort of, son of a prime minister, lobbyist type, whatever. Okay. So you have someone like Justin Trudeau who gets paid by some sort of George Soros organization. Now, why is that? It's likely because Justin Trudeau's been going around saying all these George Soros-esque type ideas. The Soros organization then sees him and pays him to keep saying those things and arranges him to get larger platforms to keep saying it. So that's often where it comes from. So the reason
it's always more effective to find someone who already believes the stuff that you believe and pay them to keep saying it, rather than take someone who couldn't care less and then try and pay them to keep saying it. Because the thing is, if money dried up from Justin Trudeau, like no one was paying any more attention to him internationally, he would still believe the same things he does. That's why it doesn't matter how many sort of international leaders meetings he goes to and how little people really care to even see him in the same room. He still keeps showing up to them because he truly believes in the crap that they're doing.
Yeah, no, very, very true. And yeah, it's more efficient. Now, that being said, we do know some political mercenaries in the country, and like they're not big enough for us to be like whatever, and it's not worth the public fight with nobodies. But there are political mercenaries out there who just like say whatever, and then there's a lot of people who just say what they think will be popular. So there's a lot of people who aren't like paid shills, but notice they're just being inconsistent because they're always going with the like most popular thing. Like if you believe
I think you've just pointed out the fact that the people who tend to be doing this aren't exactly worth anyone's time. So if you're a paid shill, you're not going to get up very high in the ranks of politics because, well, you don't really believe what you're doing, so you don't really work too hard at it to a certain extent. Why work hard at something you don't care about if you're already being paid to do whatever you were already doing? In terms of like, I'm being paid for the effort I'm going to be put in, I'm not going to go above and beyond. I'm just going to do whatever gets me the money.
Yeah. So here's something that's a bit of a misconception. I thought this too, and then I asked my parents who are doctors, and no, we don't actually have abortion until birth. It's basically we just
don't have a law.
We just don't have a law. Like it's not like if you do an abortion at 7 months, let's say, you don't go to jail as a doctor. Like we won't persecute you, but you can't really get one.
It depends what you're talking about, because it's just more so we don't really have the industry for it, just because the way healthcare is sort of structured. So you don't really get like Planned Parenthood type abortion clinics in Canada, but also we do at least have some conscience rights. So in New Brunswick, you can basically just not get an abortion at any time because pretty much every single doctor signed up to the fact that they just won't do it. And that also, to a certain extent, doesn't even make that much money. So they don't really want to get into the practice at all because, one, it's kind of gross. And then two, well, I'm not even making much money to do it anyway. So I'm just going to kind of wash my hands of the whole thing.
Yeah. That's the other thing. So like Canada's a bit wishy, but Canada's abortion laws are a lot more reasonable than people will, and that anyone on any side is willing to admit, quite honestly. So basically, Canada's abortion is kind of like, okay, anyone can get one, first trimester.
But we just don't have as many resources thrown at it.
Second trimester, it's like, you can do it, but there's a lot of hoops to jump through. So it's easy to get one at first trimester, trimester. It's very difficult to get one at second trimester, and it's almost unheard of to have third trimester abortions in Canada, because
which is always why I never understand why nobody runs on like late term abortions in Canada and banning them, because it already doesn't really happen much, so people aren't really going to be that hysterical, and like 80% of people would agree with you. Like, it's always kind of a myth whenever people say like, oh, Canadians are like 60% pro-choice or 70%. I'm like, yeah, but only like 10% overall of people are like, yes, keep it legal in all cases, and like the vast majority of people usually have a line they'll draw somewhere.
Now, the biggest issue in Canada on abortion is America, really.
Yeah.
That's where we get to. So, the biggest story is actually the leak, and I want to focus on the leak at the Supreme Court because this is legitimately dangerous. And it is highly likely that this was leaked by someone with left-wing political leanings within the Supreme Court for the purpose of stirring up a mob to intimidate the justices to change their votes to overturn Roe v. Wade on this. So that's one thing. Like, and people asking Lauren, what was leaked? What was leaked is the first draft of the majority decision in a case of Mississippi, and states' abortion rights. And basically, this case, both sides sort of argued on the Roe v. Wade question. So the Supreme Court had to make a decision on, is Roe v. Wade constitutional? So the draft written, so it looks like it passed 5-4 because there are 4 liberal judges on the court, even though 6 appointed by Republicans. Roberts has always
he jumps back and forth despite being the Chief Justice.
Yeah, Roberts
and being supposedly conservative, but yeah.
Yeah, Roberts is not a Republican judge. Like, he is the one who passed Obamacare. He was never going to vote. Okay, all this aside. Okay, fine. So it looks like Roberts was not, because Roberts is Chief Justice, which means since Alito wrote the decision, it means it's
he's technically the most senior, so it always just goes to the most senior person after the Chief Justice is not with the majority of the court on an issue.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Wyatt. So someone within the Supreme Court leaked the decision, and this is highly criminal, and really dangerous to the democracy. Like, when we're talking about things that are a threat to democracy, this is one of them, because you have 9 people in America who are very public in a country that's very politically charged, and in order for the Supreme Court to function, all the justices have to have confidence that drafts and whatever won't be leaked, and all decisions be hectored from the point of political opinion, because these are being leaked in the most dangerous times for a judge. Because think of it, after the decision's been made, even if you're a crazy person, there's no real motive other than revenge to go after Samuel Alito or any of the Amy Coney Barrett, Gorsuch, or any of them, right? You might be a mad terrorist and do a pro-choice terrorist attack. Okay. But in this specific time period where a decision's been made, but the final votes have not been cast, this is when there's motivation towards political violence, because now the game theory is, well, if I intimidate this judge enough to change their vote, right, and threaten them with violence, I might get a result, right? So it's not just revenge for a bad decision, in your opinion, right? There's active benefit in your mind to committing violence, because if you threaten a Supreme Court justice, you could get this, you could change this decision. And think of this, Supreme Court was ruling on something with guns, and they had an anti-gun law, and then people leaked that, oh no, the Supreme Court might challenge your guns, right? What if there's some crazy person that's going to go after Sonia Sotomayor? So,
there's a reason why judges aren't even supposed to talk about politics at any point in at any point at all. They don't even clap during the State of the Union from the president, because they don't want to show any deference between for any particular side. Even if they were nominated by Republicans or they were nominated by Democrats, they're really supposed to just try and act as neutral as possible. So when they're trying to make a decision, it would be best for them to be in a situation where they can sort of be in a mind space where they can actually try and be neutral and just sort of evaluate the law for what it's supposed to be. Of course, that doesn't usually happen with Democratic picks, and they just sort of rule on whatever they want. But they're supposed to at least be allowed to have the right headspace to be able to make decisions. And the whole point is what the Democrats are doing is they're trying to make this a bigger issue than it really is, even though literally all Justice Alito and a lot of the other majority justices in this case are basically just saying is that the Roe v. Wade decision didn't make any sense in the first place, and it was a complete dog's breakfast of a decision. So we're just putting it back to the states because there's nothing in the Constitution that gives you the right to an abortion, but a state can rule in favor of it. There's no right for or against, so your state can decide, and it's pretty it's really not that bad. I'm not sure what anyone's supposed to why anyone would have a problem with it.
Yeah, but I think you hit it. You explained it, I think, 20 minutes ago, when this is how the left operates: is they want to federally top-down impose their beliefs on everyone else. Now, let's steelman the argument, and I'll go full pro-choice for now. This is my favorite comment of all time. I just looked down at the comments. I saw Kissinger work with the CIA. Guys, he was Secretary of Defense. Of course, he worked with the CIA. He was Henry Kissinger. That was his job. You can disagree with Henry Kissinger, but you can't ever argue he did work with the CIA. Okay, where was I going? So the argument from the left would go as follows: is what about those women who have been, raped or abused in Texas, who are in rural Texas, who can't go somewhere else to get an abortion? Would they be forced to, abort the baby? You can conduct this incredible scenario of, okay, ultra religious family in Texas, or a state that doesn't allow abortion, hard for person to get access to it, gets impregnated by abusive uncle, family doesn't believe that, thinks daughter is a slut, gets kicked out of her house, ruins her life. She has to deal with this all the time. What are we doing for this daughter? She should have the right to a safe and legal abortion. Is kind of what they're saying. Is I'm fighting for my fellow woman out in Texas who would fall into the scenario.
Yeah, well, this hypothetical that would never happen is really just not how the law works, and I just find it kind of and it's a good steal. It's a good steal, man. But it's one of those things where that's constantly what you hear from the sort of pro-choice side, and I think there a lot of people make the point where it's okay, well, if we make that legal, is it okay if we get rid of Roe v. Wade if we all have cutouts in every single state for that sort of thing? And they'll basically never say that okay, we'll agree to that, because that's not really the point. They just want it to be legal in all stages and whatnot. And to a certain extent, the law is really not to make life perfect. It's just to give guidelines to how we should live.
Can I tell you one of my favorite moments from my quick CBC watching today? So it was about abortion, because everything was. So this was, I think, Power and Politics with Vashti Capellas. And he was, one of the CBC people was talking to Katrina Gold, who used to be one of the ministers of censorship. She's one of the ministers who was there because I think Trudeau looked at her butt and was like, ooh, nice. And gave her an important role in our country. And she's like, what are we going to do? Less free speech. But she has a job now, and she's minister of something or other. It doesn't matter, because they're all idiots. And they were asking questions like, will American women be able to come to Canada to get an abortion if they need it? Will American women be able, states, there's different states. You go to New York or California or Seattle. I'm sure all the border states will have abortions. You don't have to go.
It's like just basically a bunch of lazy people are protesting the Supreme Court. You guys, you could just walk in all the time and effort that you're having to do for this to another state.
Yeah, you could go to another state. You don't have to go to Canada. You can go to but it just shows how fundamentally, either dishonest or uneducated pro-choice, and being generous, is when it comes to the arguments. They just don't understand what's going on, and they're throwing a temper tantrum. And it's like talking to a toddler. So this is where it makes it very hard for someone like me to be pro-choice. And so one of the things I mentioned, we talked about before this started, is a lot of what's happening now that gives me, as someone who's pro-choice, but just makes me laugh at times when it's Roe's getting repealed, is this is all the bad faith, terrible arguments, malicious, stupid arguments of the left coming home to roost. It's all of them coming home to roost. All right. It's, hey, my body, my choice. My body, my choice. My body, my choice. Okay. Mandatory vaccines. No, your body, my choice. mandatory. Everyone has to get vaccinated. We're going to take your jobs away. Okay, well, and I was saying, like, there's one great point where, like, I was having an argument with the family where it was like, this is mandatory vaccines, but don't you think? And then I'm like, okay, apply that to abortion. And my aunt was like, damn, I knew you'd say that. Like,
I like how in the scenario they actually knew that was true. They were just hoping he wouldn't bring it up.
yeah. So I mean, that's the that's the thing. So you have that. Then you have also, abortion's a women's topic. Men shouldn't be able to talk about abortion. Men should never be able to talk about abortion ever. Okay. All right. And then trans women are women and men can get pregnant. Well, not all of these live in the same universe, right? So then you played the birthing persons. You couldn't say women for a while. So you were all the TERFs, right? Hashtag TERF life matters. TERF's life matters. So all the women who were like radical feminists who were probably going to fight this, and I feel bad for the TERFs, but they were all exiled from the left. The left spent a lot of time, attacking feminists for talking about women's rights and, specifically things that apply to women. And this was anathema because trans men can get pregnant and women are what? Trans women are women. So all this is going on to roost.
Yeah, it's sort of funny how as soon as the Roe v. Wade is being threatened, suddenly everyone becomes a biologist overnight.
Yeah, this is, yeah, everyone, all of a sudden everyone's a biologist overnight. That's a great line. You should tweet that.
I will. I think I read it somewhere, so I'm actually not going to do that.
Okay,
I think within an hour of anything happening, people have dug up the funniest things over the past 12 months that have happened to apply to the situation.
Yeah, and like the other problem is, and I think what drove a lot of this, maybe in the culture war and to push forward is, there was like pro-life and pro-choice, and the pro-life people are pretty generally pro-life. Like if you talk to a pro-life person, they will say, life starts at conception, and this is not about, like, always the stupidest argument ever. It's like Republicans or conservatives just want to control women's bodies. It's like, no, that's not what they're doing. The argument is there's two bodies inside of there, two lives, and they want to protect the life of the fetus, right? So you then had a sort of, when abortion comes in, the Bill Clinton sort of safe, legal, and rare. That's what we want. Abortions aren't good, but sometimes they're needed. So we want it to be safe for people to get them, legal so they don't have to worry about going to jail, and rare because we want minimal amount of abortions because they're not a good thing. And this is the type of thing that, people like me can get behind because it's like, okay, abortion obviously is not good. It is not a good thing that people are aborting babies, but sometimes in life there are hard choices to be made and sometimes things are worse. So I'm sort of the, should you get an abortion if like you just had a night of unprotected sex? Well, no, there's adoptions, a lot of things. But, rape, incest, all these extreme circumstances, I'm fine with it. And like, I've seen one of those rare circumstances. So they do happen. And, I don't hold it against the person I know who got one. So there's a rare circumstance. But it's like me to say, okay, I am pro-choice because I do think there is an important part of liberty to it. And you have to acknowledge that there is a fetal life in there and a potential for life. And what a free society ultimately comes down for, if you're going to make the pro-choice argument, is I think it's along the lines of, it's within the person's body to make decisions for themselves. So this is not a good thing, but there are some times in life when you have to choose between two horrible choices. And for society as a whole to be free, we have to err on the side of choice. And that's probably the better thing. So that gets me slightly to the pro-choice thing. But there's no one who holds that opinion really, except for Henry here, who basically is sort of on my thing of like, for me, it would be the past country should protect first trimester abortions, leaves second up to state, ban third trimester. Yeah, like that's kind of like that's not. I mean, it's hard to define, but if in an ideal world, I actually don't think that's that bad. Keep it open for first. States can choose the second and never in the third. And I think, that's kind of what would make but that's something. The problem is that's a compromise that makes everyone unhappy, and that's not an issue where And my favorite thing on abortion, I'll say this and I'll let Wyatt cut it and do the pro-life argument, is the best commentary on abortion is a Simpsons episode from 1996, a Halloween episode, when it's Kang and Kodos and they've abducted Bob Dole and Bill Clinton, and they're at a rally, and one of the aliens in front of Bill Clinton's like, America, no, they're like, abortions for all, and everyone's like, boo. Okay, no abortions, boo. And it's like, okay, abortions for some, miniature American flags for others, and then everyone goes crazy. So that's kind of like,
Anyway, so I'll get to I actually really don't like the pro-life label just because, I don't know, it kind of overlaps on some other issues that I don't really care about. So I just like to call it anti-abortion because I'm more so against the actual specific act, because I'm very pro-death penalty at the same time, and I'm pro-death penalty for the exact same reason I'm anti-abortion, where the whole point is I want policies that promote life in general. And of course, I would say the death penalty does promote life in the sense that it actually does protect other people's lives. It sort of holds up the importance of people's lives and holds, like, basically kind of enshrines in law how evil it is to take someone's life unjustifiably. So I'd be also anti-abortion because even just outside of the fact that it's not really I don't think you really have you don't get to make the decision to eliminate a baby's life before it's actually born. At the same time, it also promotes the sort of just sanctity and just sort of value of life everywhere, not to get rid of it. I think there was a higher value on life back when there was fewer abortions than there are today when there's like complete liberty in Canada to have an abortion whenever you want at whatever trimester. I know you might have to jump through some hoops, but at the same time, you can get it. And just the fact that you can get that, I think, just lowers the value of life overall. Same thing with with assisted suicide laws. I find that is just lowering the quality of the entire society's life in order for us to just say that there are moments when life stops being valuable, and it can be arbitrary completely. Because I find that arbitrary laws tend to grow over time in ways that you didn't expect.
No, I think that's fair, especially in the assisted suicide one. And I think we've seen on assisted suicide, like that one's a bit different because it's like you choosing, right? This is like the baby being like, screw this, I'm out. Not the woman being like, screw you. But you're starting to see, assisted suicide for, mental illness. And you're like, whoa, that's bad. That's not.
And I think that, and the thing is that they're getting common where there's investigations going on after someone's mother was essentially died in hospital. And I'm not going to call it suicide because it's very dubious whether or not she actually wanted the doctors to end her life. So there's always going to be bleeding in the negative direction on arbitrary laws like this, and I think it's better for us to promote people living life as well as they possibly can, rather than kind of cutting around the corners and kind of reducing the amount of life in our society.
Yeah, and this is why I'm like 49% on the pro-life side, because you're absolutely right about the moral breakdown in society. I see it a lot in like the environmental movement, and like this is where like we've come to the ultimate value, like, or the sort of horrifying thing where like people are just saying life doesn't matter. And in fact, it's not so much that life doesn't matter. This is, we've gone all the way to the fact where life is bad. Human life is bad to a lot of environmentalists. In a sense, like, right? They're always talking about population control. Like, how often does it come up in a movie or TV show? The Avengers is the number one thing, the Thanos thing. It's the bad guy becomes sympathetic in some way because he just needs to kill so many people because it's to save the planet, guys. So yes, he's the bad guy but he was complicated because he wanted to murder everyone for the planet, and human life in itself is bad. So he's kind of a good guy because he wants to kill people. And I've seen so many times where that's like the twist of like, oh, it was for the greater good. That's why, this happened. So
I think that we could also even just apply this to sort of like illicit drug legalization, is that you could maybe make the argument like, well, it reduces crime to make drugs legal. Like, of course it does. You've eliminated a bunch of crimes, so now we're no longer enforcing crimes. But even when they say, well, it make it better, people like recreational drugs that are on the market would be cleaner than ones you buy on the street. At the same time, I think it does lower the quality of society to then say that we're just all okay with people doing meth. And I think that it's borne out in places like Portland and like Nanaimo and whatnot when they put up illicit drug injection sites. And even though technically it's cleaner, whenever you go to those places after they've been opened, and I went to Nanaimo at one point after they had those drug injection sites opened up, it got worse. Like the whole place, just kind of the quality of the city itself just felt degraded by the fact that we are just kind of in favor of degrading activities.
Yeah, and the safe injection sites are another thing, because it's like, so yes, you're doing the opiates safe, but then the people who do opiates like also like to smoke crack or all these other drugs. So the drug dealers are then handing out there to get at those guys who are like, when you're high, like the great irony of calling marijuana a gateway drug, it's actually not much of a gateway drug. Alcohol is the biggest gateway drug because it lowers your inhibitions, right? So, but there are other things too, like, but when you're on the influence of other drugs, it lowers, inhibition, right? Which makes you more likely to purchase other drugs. So it's a great place to set up if you're a drug dealer, because you have clientele who do drugs, and then, people on drugs. So people who are willing to spend money. So people who do drugs on drugs, selling them more drugs, is a great, it's a magnet for crime.
And I think there's a libertarian argument even for keeping like pretty much like the vast majority of illicit drugs illegal, simply because you can't really practice liberty when you are completely, like completely smacked out of your mind on meth.
There's that too. There's also the thing, like, and then there's things like, we shouldn't be wasting time, especially in Canada, like enforcing marijuana criminally. Like no one's on board with that. Like as a majority. That being said, like, once it went legal, like the government got control of it. Now we're wasting money, right, on all this. So like I'm sort of on the, weed should be illegal again, just so it can be decriminalized and we get it out of the hands of the government. Like, no, it should be illegal so it's more fun, and then it should be decriminalized so no one cares. That's where we should be. Is just go back to that. But in terms of like other drugs, yeah, it's like, if you want to change philosophy on how you handle things, I'm fine. Like, I don't want to see cocaine legalized or crack legalized, but if you want to change it so that people in possession of crack cocaine, instead of going to jail, go to rehab, and we invest in getting people off of drugs, well, okay, then let's have.
To be fair, it does get you off of drugs if you're in prison for an extended period of time and can't use them.
Well, not always. There's a lot
They don't exactly give you drugs in prison.
But there's a black market in prison for drugs.
Sort of. I don't know.
Listen, Wyatt, I have a couple face tattoos. I do hard time.
He's watched Goodfellas a couple times.
I watched Goodfellas a couple times. I watched it only once, but I will watch it again soon. And then I'll be an expert on drugs or prison. One of the two. I will get, you know what, guys? I'll get a tattoo of Wyatt's face onto my face. You get my face onto your face. And that way everyone knows that TNT is the best place for face tattoos.
We couldn't buy a face-off machine from Face Off, so we're just kind of doing the tattoo method.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I think, is there anything else we have to cover here? So, when we covered the leak and how dangerous it is, it's an assault on the entire system and the safety and security of the judges and all that. You won't hear any of that from thing. Oh, yeah, I mentioned this, but so insane. I heard this on the CBC. Like, it's so clear that they're either being malicious or they're all morons. Probably both. They were saying, like, if the court can overturn and ban abortion, they're not banning abortion, they're just overturning a bad court decision. Then, what else could they do? They could, one of them was banning interracial marriage. There's a couple
like Obergefell, they're gonna like overturn gay marriage or something like that.
Yeah, like, they're just they're gonna mandate that, like, they're gonna mandate racial segregation and all that. Like, no one's talking about banning interracial marriage at all. Okay, there's a huge march for life in America. One of the biggest, bigger than the women's marches. Hundreds of thousands of people come down to Washington every year and march for life, because people who care about being pro-life or anti-abortion, whatever, really don't like when you kill all the babies. They don't like it, and they get active about it. There is no march more than 10 people nationwide for banning interracial marriage. There is no candidate in politics who would survive more than 10 minutes after they proposed a ban on interracial marriage. It is not a thing, but we are pretending it is a thing because we are insane as a society, and the CBC exists.
Yeah. Oh, and one other angle on this I want to sort of talk about in terms of like the decision.
But he's with me. Drugs in American prisons and Canadian prisons too.
anyways, so I was just going to quickly say for the thing is that the stupid thing is too is that they're basically trying to accuse Republicans of being like racist and bigoted or whatever for supporting like the Roe v. Wade being overturned, even though like Roe v. Wade was kind of the type of like, again, dog's breakfast of a court decision that would have been basically endorsing kind of Dred Scott like fugitive slave law decisions. Like it's completely just like disjointed. There's no specific thing it can find in the Constitution to be able to support why they've made the decision that they've made. But well, we can kind of cobble together something that kind of sounds like it's from the Constitution in order to justify our decision. And it's like, well, the whole point is that you can justify anything when the liberals are basically accusing conservatives of being able to justify anything, even though the conservatives are saying I can only justify what's in the Constitution. And this is why I think really why having a very solid constitution is important. That's kind of why Canada sucks in a certain way. We do not have a clear constitution, and our court can kind of say whatever they want. And to a certain extent, you have to be like, I guess so. That's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah, and then that's another one of my, like, this is a Bernie Sanders talking point. When you see Bernie Sanders talking about it, it's like when people claim you have a constitutional right to abortion, it's like, no, you don't. In 1776, no one was talking about abortions. Like, one, it's just like, it wasn't done. Two, they didn't have the technology to do it, even if they did want to. But like, can we just like be honest at some point? Like, if the left, I think, was a bit more honest about their intentions, that what they wanted, and was willing to talk about this more and why people should be allowed to do abortions, I think abortions would still be legal right now, because I think there's a lot, or Roe or whatever would still be standing. Because one of the reasons that I think it got overturned is, you know, the left challenged, you know, from what I understand, the left challenged the Mississippi state law to sort of put a ban on abortions by basically arguing on the validity of Roe v. Wade. So when they were going to push that to the Supreme Court, they should have known that by doing this, you're going to put Roe v. Wade to the legal test. And anyone should realize that Roe v. Wade is not good legal precedent. There is no constitutional right to abortion. There is none of that. The Supreme Court at this one point was kind of left-wing and said, we want abortions to be legal. And that was kind of what happened. And if the left was just a bit more honest about, you know, we want abortions, not everyone has the right to an abortion, then I think you would, I don't think they would have challenged them. I don't think they would have played with fire in Mississippi the way they did. They probably would have been a bit smarter about it. And I don't think you'd have a lot of people being so driven to put, because, you know, when, you know, the people in this chat who say they're pro-choice, like, you know, American Madhouse and I, like, we're actually pro-choice. We come from a libertarian perspective of, like, you know, but we also believe in choice to make your market decisions. You should have this choice of what school to go to. You should have all these different choices, right? So I then parlay that into other societies. The problem is, the modern left is not so much pro-choice as pro-abortion. So there is a segment of the modern left, and I think the bigger segment of the modern left is actually pro-abortion. There's the shout your abortion argument. Lena Dunham, like, you know, I get lots of abortions. It's great. And you're like, well, this is going to drive people crazy because abortions aren't good. You're still killing a fetus. No matter which way you slice it, it's still happening. So,
well, I think there is an argument too that there is a kind of an abortion industry at this point, and to a certain extent, a lot of congressional people in the U.S. are influenced not over the ideology behind it, but flat out because there is, to a certain extent, a lot of money to just promoting the procedure in general. But I just want to quickly get to something that American Madhouse or Henry said. And he said, if they got challenged on gay marriage decision, I'm not sure how they could overturn it, because isn't it based on the same reasoning as Roe? And I get what he's saying is that I was saying that it's kind of ridiculous when they say that they're going to go after gay marriage. I like everyone does kind of acknowledge that the Obergefell decision to make same-sex marriage legal on the entire United States is a really kind of crappy decision too, where they don't really find anything in the Constitution in order to basically find their way to making it legal. But at the same time, more so, I'm just saying no one's really kind of going to challenge that one. There's not really a lot of like the Supreme Court, I guarantee, is probably not going to take up an issue like that because they get to choose their topics that they take up. And Alito, in his own decision, kind of said, yeah, we're really not going to handle that one. We're kind of okay with where it is now, even if we know it's not exactly constitutional in a certain sense.
And one of the things that Alito brought into the decision, if you read it through it, is you know, a lot of the reasoning behind like Roe and what was the other one that was put to the thing of
It was Plessy versus Ferguson, I believe,
or whatever. A lot of the thing is like a lot of the decision between Roe and all that, and the sort of the pro-abortion decision was it was like this will settle the debate. Was sort of the thinking behind it, and the legal reasoning is it's a contentious issue. If we settle it here by overreaching a bit, it will do the country good because then this will be put to rest, right? Whereas Alito clearly points out, well, no, it's not been put to rest. You have all these different state legislatures still talking about it. You have, you know, it's obviously a hot button issue on both sides for, you know, pro-life, pro-choice. So this has not been put to rest. There is, you know, still a healthy public debate on this. Whereas gay marriage has kind of been put to rest. Every year, like there is, again, you're not going to see hundreds of thousands of people marching to end gay marriage because the religious argument against gay marriage is a bit more passive, let's say, in nature. It's the sense like, okay, it's a passive thing happening to you. Like, you know, there's two gay men getting married. Like, it doesn't affect you in any way. No one's dying because of it. Now, you can make the arguments that, you know, by blurring the gender and the sex stuff and taking away these definitions, it's allowed for the floodgates. And, you know, look at all the things they're teaching in classroom and look at the gender unicorn. Okay, so I just want this to stop. Okay, you get some of those people. But for the most part, when people hear gay men getting married, no one's angry at that. It's nothing bad is happening. When abortions happen, people get angry because a life is being lost. Like some, you know, you're actually ending a human life or a potential human life, depending on, you know, how you look at it there. So with gay marriage, I don't see it ever coming down to it, and even on the same thing, because a large part of this is sort of based on the fact that there's still strong public uproar on both sides that it needed to be reopened. So considering there isn't any uproar at all on the gay marriage front, I don't think it would be.
And I think generally anytime it does get brought up, it's more so people just want their like local churches or whatever religious institutions to be able to issue their own unique marriage licenses. And that's kind of it. They just want to be able to have a unique local kind of contract that they can write up. And that's kind of it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good point. Like it got serious. Like, yeah, when places like Virginia and New York wanted to do it up until birth and even like right after birth, abortions right after birth, like that kind of made people go, whatever. In Canada, we went over this at the beginning, but you actually can't really get a third trimester abortion in Canada. It doesn't really happen.
You can. It's still legal, and that's kind of the problem. But at the same time, like you're just going to be hard pressed to find someone who will even do it for you because there's really no money in being that kind of a doctor here. But I was just going to add on something I remember.
I have two doctor parents in Ontario, and they've never heard of one even happening. So
they're just rare. You can still get them though. There's no law in Canada actually restricting it unless there's like a specific local health order regulation. But that would be kind of it. Anyways, but it was just going to be sort of my additive on point is the reason why I think Alito and sort of the majority Republican justices on the Supreme Court are kind of seemingly making this move at this moment to get rid of Roe is because they know Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and just the entire Democratic Party is so unpopular right now. If they make this move, they really kind of can't do anything to them. Like, what are they going to do? Pack the courts for 6 months and then have all those people get impeached when the Republicans take over? Like, there's nothing they can do.
Exactly. And I think that's a good place to end it because we hit about an hour there. I will post again. Tomorrow, if you want to talk about abortion, remember, it's Abortion tomorrow, right after the Leaf game ends. So right after the hockey game, it will be a space where you guys can give your opinions on abortion. And we will only be listening to men talk here because abortion is a men's issue, as the left has told us. So it's time for women to sit and listen to opinions on abortion from the boys, including expert on women's bodies, Wyatt Claypool.